Doors are open. Doors are open.
Yeah, I don't pay attention to the bottom part.
Okay.
It's better that I don't. And I
Looks
just
like we're on YouTube now. Okay.
Lots of friends in the room. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, everyone. If you haven't changed your chat settings, please go ahead and change that to all panelists and attendees. So when you are communicating with us, we can see it down there in the chat. And if you do have something specific question-wise, it's always great to hit that Q&A tab. It helps us see all the questions directly. We do our best to kind of filter through the chat space, but we tend to overlook some questions sometimes. So helps us in a big way to filter things to Q&A. So thank you for that. I guess Mary Jo's getting situated. I don't know if I guess Doug's he's here, but I think we should be okay to get started.
He doesn't want to show his face. Scared everybody away yesterday.
Right. I think we're good to roll right now. Looks like we're
on. I'm here. I'm just using my camera. 1 second. So go ahead.
Okay, good deal. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone who's been following along our TM 101 webinars. If you've been following along up to this point, you know our Thursdays are an inspirational day to kind of take a step back from the topics and learn about some people that are empowering the industry. And today we have Ina Jacobs with us. So thank you, Ina, for joining us today to tell us a little bit about your story. And we couldn't be more excited to have you join us today. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
I know that we got some wonderful talking points from yesterday, and I know that I think 5-1 was going to kick things off and talk about your beginnings and how things kind of get started in your world.
Yep. So Ina, can you tell us where you're originally from, how you get started, and your early touring years?
Oh God. Okay. So I was originally born in Quincy, Massachusetts. Woo! But I think that I was always a New Yorker trapped in a Bostonian's body. So as soon as I graduated high school in 1989, so I'm aging myself right now, I moved to New York City and I went to NYU. And the second year that I was at NYU, they actually started the music industry program, which definitely is a shell of what it is now. Like now it's like, I think, a proper program. It was pretty minimal when I was there. But my dorm room happened to be a few blocks away from CBGB's. So I sort of like set my eyes when I was like 18 years old that like, I need to work at CBGB's. And so I sort of went to CBGB's every single day for like months. Like I drove these people crazy and I was like, will you give me a job? Will you give me a job? And I basically harassed them. And they finally relented like a couple months and they were like, this woman is not going to go away. Like, what can we do with her? Like, let's just do something with her. And so they agreed to give me a job and I was there for a couple of years. So I was sort of like in the music industry program and working at CBGB's at the same time, and realized quite quickly that I was learning more by being at CB's the entire time than actually in college. So instead of spending $20,000 a year at NYU for a degree that was not going to get me a job in the music industry, I decided to quit school and just use that money to like, you know, keep myself afloat and, you know, pay the bills, etc. And was at CB's for a few years. And it was always my dream to work for Bill Graham because he was, you know, known as one of the greatest promoters in the world. And I set my eyes to work at BGP. So when I was just shy of 21, I packed up my life and I drove across the country with like, you know, a couple of boxes and moved to San Francisco and set my eyes on working with Bill, except that the October before I moved in January, and the October right before I moved, Bill died in the helicopter crash. It was like my dreams of like working for Bill had like crushed, but I was like, I'm going to San Francisco anyway. And I went there and I was really lucky. John Brannigan from William Morris, who I'd known from working, from like basically working with Louise at CBGB's, answering the phone and working the door and taking care of Hilly Crystal's dog and shit. Like I was like basically, you know, I was young and they were having me do everything. I got a job working with Dawn Holiday at the Paradise Lounge in San Francisco, sort of helping her book stuff and assist with her. And then booked a couple of shows for the for Bimbo's 365 Club. I was the first person to put any shows in there, but it was like, I mean, I think I put like 3 shows in there. I can't remember what they were. They were so long ago. And it's definitely not what it is now. It was really at the beginnings, and did a bunch of odd jobs there, but always like in, working in the club scene, and was obsessed, like wanting to go on the road so bad. Like when I went to my first concert ever, I was like, I need to go on the road. I don't even know what that means. Like we didn't have the internet. You couldn't Google what that was. I just knew I was like good at math and I loved music, and I didn't know how to do that. I was just like, how do you do, like, what is this? My father was going crazy. Like, oh my God, I spent all this money on this wonderful high school education for my child. And like, she's working at rock clubs, like devastated, couldn't see the light through the trees. And so I had befriended the Jesus Lizard, who at the time was my favorite band in the whole wide world, and thought they were the greatest live band on the planet. I still think they're one of the best on the planet. And I was basically harassing them. Every time they'd come to New York, when I was living in New York, they played CB's, and I'd be like, you guys can sleep on my couch. And then like, anytime they were in San Francisco, I'd let them sleep, in my house. And like, I befriended them. And I had decided that like things were sort of slow moving in San Francisco, but I couldn't really quite figure out, it wasn't really happening for me. So I decided to move back to New York. And on my way back to New York, I stopped in Chicago and I called up David Yao, the lead singer of the Jesus Lizard. And I was like, hey, can I sleep on your couch now? Right. And he was like, sure. And then I got there and realized that they were leaving for tour in like 2 weeks. And I was like, you have to give me a job going on the road with you. And they were like, no, we're good. We're good. We don't need anybody. And I basically staged a sit-in and was like, I'm not leaving your house until you agree to take me on the road with you. Like, this is a real story. And they were like, we're good. And I'm like, no, like, I will do this for free. I don't care. Like, I have to go on the road with you. And they relented. Like, I mean, I was pretty convincing. And so I went out on the road for $200 a week, like $10 per diems a day. I drove the van, I loaded the gear, I, sold the merch, I did everything. I was like, yes, rock and roll. And it was like amazing because I was like 21, 22 years old, green as green could be. And they were they're probably 10 years older than me on average, all of those guys. And they picked on me relentlessly. I mean, like I was hazed on a daily basis. But it was like the greatest tour in the world. It was like the Jesus Lizard Girls Against Boys and John Spencer Blues Explosion or something. Like, hello, in the early 90s, that is like the coolest fucking tour ever. And I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. So that was sort of like, that sort of eliminated the how do you get a job on the road? No one will give you a job on the road if you've never been on the road before, kind of a thing. And so I finally like broke the door open. So at least I could say that. And in booking shows and stuff in San Francisco, I had made relationships with some local booking agents and stuff. So I obviously, networking is like really the only way you get any gigs around here anyway. So I had learned to network starting at my days in CBGBs and had become friends with people like Marty Diamond and, people have like come on to become like some, the biggest, most successful out there. So I started networking with people from the get-go, and basically I hustled. So as soon as the Jesus Lizard was over, it was just making phone calls. Either it was, Botch, who books the Jesus Lizard, and like, hey, who do you have going out again? Or I got the Polestar management directory and literally sent out my email to every single manager in the entire book. And if I was in New York, I hand delivered them I was tenacious because we also didn't have the internet. You couldn't like mass email people. You couldn't Google this. Like you had to be like crazy resourceful. And I was obsessed. Like I was like, this is going to be my job. Like I need to do this. So I just, through all of those different channels, started picking up other gigs. The next one was like Nick Turner's Hawkwind featuring Helios Creed. I mean, they were like throwing televisions in Motel 6s. So there was a lot of, vans and, trailer and vans and Motel 6s sharing hotel rooms. I mean, it was, I got my feet dirty for sure for many, many years. Also, plowing through as a woman, Mary Jo and I have talked about this. We didn't meet each other until many years into our career. It wasn't very often that I saw another woman. So sort of convincing people that I wasn't there to, literally like have sex with the band members and I was there to actually do a job. That was a hard thing to convince people for a while. And it took a lot of tenacity and motivation. And so I was probably in vans for like, I don't know, like maybe 4 years or something, 3 or 4 years. Like it was quite some time. And then once you get into that tour bus, it's like, you feel like you've hit the mother lode. You're like, this is the greatest thing you've ever, like this is, you can't go back. Like once you go into a tour bus, it's like, forget it. But then I sort of got, for many years, I was on that one tour bus tour. And that's a really, during those formative, like first 5, 6, 7 years, I think of anybody doing any job, that's when you sort of figure out like, who are you? Who are you in this job? What do you do in this job? What is this job? You have to fuck up a lot. You make a lot of mistakes. It's very humbling. And you just make a lot of relationships. That's when your headliner, hopefully, if they're nice, can be supportive and you can ask questions and you can go out on a day off, maybe with the tour manager, or the production manager, and be like, hey, help, and you just develop those relationships that hopefully, and then you realize like, all relationships matter, because there was a time when I was with this band, Jacko Pierce, for 3 years. That was amazing because we did like 200 shows a year. And that's when you really can you're not so stressed out about your relationship with the band. You've developed it already. You can kind of relax and, really hone in on how you do your job and what that job looks like. And we had a little baby band called Matchbox 20 open up for us, at one point. And I had, was really nice to the support act and really nice to that tour manager and took him aside when he was like, I don't really know how to settle a show. Will you teach me? Like, what does that look like? And I was still learning, but really enthusiastic about the mathematics and came to realize that, the math and all the numbers of the touring was more interesting to me. So I was super passionate about that. And I was always giving people my settlement sheets, which now I look back at, they're like the worst settlement sheets in the world, which is hilarious. But back in the day, I thought they were amazing because I was teaching myself Excel and would teach him how to do that. And then, a year later, Jacko Pierce was supporting Matchbox 20, and then, they treated us really nice. So you never know who's going to be ahead of you and who's going to be, beneath you and how it's all going to work out. And, that was always really interesting. So I developed all of those relationships. And then, 9 years in, 8, 9 years in, I was like, didn't really love the tour managing part of it. It was just sort of like it wasn't really resonating with me. The whole, I'm a woman, I'm sensitive. I know it may not seem sometimes, but I'm very sensitive on the inside. And I took on that, my band member is unhappy, it's my fault kind of a thing. And I just couldn't get over those dynamics of being the caretaker. And I really, I just realized that my strength was in numbers and my strength was in the finances of it. And my strength was in operationally. It just wasn't in the personal dynamics. It was less interesting to me. I just felt like I wasn't good at that. And I think that understanding your strengths and working towards those and then hiring other people to support what you're not strong at makes the good team, So I just knew that I wanted to be a tour accountant, but there wasn't any women tour accountants out there and I couldn't convince anybody to hire me as a tour accountant. So there was actually a moment where I quit the road for 3 months. And I was like, I don't know what to do. And I happened to be dating somebody who was on tour with Dave Matthews. And so I went on tour as the girlfriend for Dave Matthews, for one of the sound guys. And I was hanging out. And then I was lucky enough that the manager, the booking agent and the business manager of John Mayer were, I had all worked with previously, and they all came to me and they said, we want you to work with this new guy. His name is John Mayer. And I was like, he was like some baby at that time. Like he wasn't who he is now. And I was like, okay, but then, you know, of course they wanted to pay me like half of what I had been making. And they were like, trust me, this is going to be huge. Like this is going to be a great opportunity and you're going to be the tour accountant. So I was like, I don't care. Yes. Right. And then I was with John for 10 years. So that really, as the tour accountant, and that really helped me kind of hone in on what is a tour accountant? What does that mean? And I just embraced that gig to the nth degree. So that was sort of where I got to
How
that.
did you make the transition from John into bigger tours? Because you worked with some of the largest acts as tour accountant also. So how did you make that shift?
Well, I think that, you know, over those 10 years with John, I really honed in on how can I be the best tour manager, a tour accountant I know how to be, you know, and really embraced every aspect of follow the money and like, where's the money? And I think that I developed a lot of relationships over the years with, you know, promoters and, you know, other managers and support acts. And I also, when John wasn't touring, I worked with I did other small things and started to develop relationships. And John had to have vocal cord surgery and he had to cancel a tour. And it was like May in the summer, like in May. And I was like, oh my God. So, and we weren't really sure at that time if John was going to be able to even sing again. Like it was this really scary time in his career where he knew that there was something wrong. He had to have surgery. I mean, you're a singer and you have to have vocal cord surgery. Like, are you kidding me? So it seemed like the right time to sort of jump off and see what else was out there, because I was full-time basically for John on salary. And I was feeling a little bit antsy in those last couple of years anyway, because, you know, you're in a relationship with everybody and it can become a little bit stagnant. And you can also, like, an artist gets into their sort of thing, and he was very much touring in the United States and some Japan and a little bit of Australia, not a ton of Europe. And it was like, you know, I was only seeing this one way to drive the car. Right. And there's a lot of other cars out there. And I felt like I needed to diversify, like in order to be, just to grow and to be, you know, to add flavor to my life even, you know, I mean, like driving the same car for 10 years can start to get stagnant and boring. And I wasn't being challenged anymore. And I felt like you have to get uncomfortable. Like it's important in life to get uncomfortable to really like grow. So, John decided, you know, was going to have vocal cord surgery, and it seemed like a good dropping off point. So then John said, like, taking a break. So I went on tour with Nickelback, did that for a couple of months, and then went out with Mumford & Sons. And then from Mumford & Sons, it was Swedish House Mafia, which, you know, and all of these gigs were coming, like, Mumford & Sons came from Mike Luba, who I had developed a relationship with. I was living in New York at the time. And, you know, the music industry in New York, we all kind of know each other. It's pretty small. And he said, come on out and help me with Gentleman of the Road stuff. So I was sort of the Gentleman of the Road accountant, came in like super last minute and helped out with that. And then the booking agent, Sam Kirby for Swedish House Mafia was like, come and do Swedish House Mafia. And I was like, yes. And then it turns out that the business manager for Swedish House Mafia and Mumford & Sons are the same as One Direction. I had done another Mumford & Sons tour after Swedish House Mafia. And then it all just sort of was like, the business manager said, you know, 1D is going to go out and they're going to do stadiums and we want you to do it. I mean, I went through quite a rigorous interview process, but then I got One Direction. And that was, you know, that was like completely bananas, because first of all, I'd never known a woman to do a world stadium tour as the tour accountant, running the whole world stadium, 3 stages, leapfrogging all over the world. I didn't really have anybody not a lot of people to talk about it with. So when I got the gig, I sort of locked myself in my apartment for 3 months and built every spreadsheet I could possibly think of to prepare myself for that. It was like training to climb Mount Everest. And it was bananas and amazing and incredible and super. It was, I can't say enough amazing stuff about it. So
Ina,
yes.
you talk about leveling up, and you know, you've leveled up to the biggest tour in the world there, you know, One Direction. Was there any point in your career where you thought you might be leveling up too fast, or that you were given an opportunity and you weren't sure whether you could step up to that level? Did you question yourself? And if so, how did you get over that? Because that's something that I'm sure we all resonate with
Yeah.
a big jump in level of touring. Is that something you ever faced?
I mean, there's definitely fear when you get a job. Like I'm great in a room. I sat there with the manager of One Direction, was like, I got this. I could do this. I had settled a bunch of stadiums before, but I'd never managed a millions and millions of dollar budget of a tour leapfrogging stages. So, you know, I had this moment where all of a sudden I was like, I need to get this job. And then I got the job. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, Buck, like I need to actually do this job. Like, whoa. And might have had a fetal position moment for a second. Like, what am I going to do? Then I made a few phone calls to, you know, friends who I knew had been on bigger tours and helped me kind of like lift me up. And then I just literally locked myself in a room and studied hard and didn't take anything for granted. And honestly, the only way you learn and the only way you grow is to get uncomfortable. And you're going to fall and you're going to fuck up, and it's okay. Like, you have to. If life is easy and it's always just an easy progression, you're never really going to learn the lessons. Like, you have to fuck up to learn those lessons, you know? So I think it's all good. Like, you know, you got to get uncomfortable, you know? And if you fuck up and it doesn't work for you, okay, go do something else then. Like, it doesn't work. And, you know, we talked about this yesterday. I've been fired. It's all good. Like, that shit grows hair on your chest. You know what I mean? Like, you got to do that. You got to, you know, put your big boy pants on, your big girl pants on, and you got to lift your head up and move forward and take a good look at yourself. Like, there's a reason why it didn't work out. And it doesn't necessarily mean that I sucked at my job, or there's a million reasons why, right? Universe has a plan. They, you know, universe is saying like, that door's got to close for you to go into another door, or, you know, or take a good look at yourself. Like, look at the feedback that they gave you. You know, sometimes you got to look at yourself in the mirror and be like, probably could have been nicer. Or listen, I had a reputation for quite some time at the beginning. I felt like I had to be the loudest person in the room, you know, and realized it took a long time for me to realize that maybe it was just better to be the smarter person in the room than the loudest person in the room. But I felt like, you know, in the early 90s, there weren't a lot of women doing this, and the only way to be heard was to be loud, right? And I learned, you know, after many, many years of actually embracing the job and learning the nuances of the job, that people will hear you if you're smart and not if you're loud, you know? And so that takes a minute. Like, I messed up all the time. The good news is that I scared people a lot in the beginning. And so when I came back and I started to lighten up, people were like, oh, that wasn't bad at all. Like, so I sort of like, I went backwards where people were a bit scared of me. I think sometimes, like, people have come up to me since and be like, you made me cry. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. Like, I never intended to make people cry, but I definitely lightened up as the years went on, and I became more comfortable in my job, and I came to learn like what your job is. And I think a lot of times when people are assholes in their job, it's because they're insecure, you know, and because they're not really comfortable with what they're doing. So they just come off like really strong. But I think once you know what you're doing and you're comfortable with your gig, you know, you don't need to be an asshole. Like, there's no reason. Like, it's totally unnecessary. So, but you have to learn those lessons. And I didn't have a lot of people. I had a lot of people who supported me along the way, but not anybody who like really had to sit down with me, like full on mentoring, so to speak. Like, I had a lot of people who I could have conversations with and who taught me a lot of things, but you got to learn the lessons.
I know. as you've been navigating, expanding your portfolio, we started talking a little bit about your turning points and how you kind of started shifting gears towards CAA and your role there with CAA. Can you talk to us a little bit about the turning point and how you kind of moved out of touring into more of
Sure.
the agency side?
Yeah, I would say in the last 5 years of my touring, because altogether it's 20 plus years, and that's a really long time to be living on the road. And I joke about it, but I say to all of my lady friends, I gave my fertile years to rock and roll. And I did, for the last, between the ages of 40 and 45, I sort of struggled with like, when do you stop? Like, do you stop? When do you stop? Like there's going to be a point where you either decide I'm going to die on this tour bus and I'm going till the end of time, or it's time to jump, right? And knowing when it's time to jump is kind of crucial, because I didn't want to be this bitter, angry person on the road, because there's a lot of roadies out there who have been doing this 20 plus years who are kind of miserable. Like they're not happy. Like, and you're like, why are you here? Like, we got a shot at this life. Like, let's be happy. Like, go do something else. Like, it's like, who are you proving? What point are you trying to prove? Right. And I felt like I'd hit the glass ceiling a little bit with One Direction. And I felt like the only way for me to keep challenging myself was to really sustain that stadium thing, because arenas was going to start to get, stagnant for me. And I'm always someone who's doing self-reflection and wanting to grow and wanting to be better and what else is next and how can I use my tools to help other people. And I just didn't want to get bored and bitter. And so I had a bit of a fetal position moment just at the tail end of One Direction. But I'd been toying with leaving the road, starting with John. Like at the end of John, I was like, should I go? Is this the time? The time is now. But gigs, really good gigs kept happening. Anyway, I had a fetal position moment and I had a reflection. It was the April, One Direction ended really October. And in the April, I had this moment. And so I had April to October on the road with One Direction to really reflect, like, is this it? Is this going to be it? Like, I think it is. And I called Brian Manning and Mike Greek from CAA, who are some of the greatest agents on the planet. I'm obsessed with the two of them. And they've been so incredibly supportive of me and my career. And we worked really well together. And I said, hey, I'm going to leave the road after One Direction. And they had sort of, they were like, absolutely not. Like, we've already have the next 3 years planned for you. Like, you can't. And I was like, I'm out. I have to do this. Or at least I have to see what life looks like off of the road. And I can always go back. I mean, it's not like permanent, but you kind of have to try. You have to take that risk. You got to get uncomfortable. So I was living in New York. I left New York. I moved to LA. And I decided to just like wipe the slate clean and start my life over and see, I broke up with my life as I knew it to see what life would look like. And during that time, CAA basically was like, we want you to come here. We have an idea. And I was like, I don't want to be an agent. That's a lot of artist engagement. And like I said, that I always knew that wasn't necessarily where my strength lies. It was really money and finances. And they're like, we don't know what exactly it looks like. We have an idea. Just come and we'll figure it out. And so I moved to LA anyway. It wasn't for CAA. And I sort of dated a bunch of people for the first 8 months of me living in LA. I did part-time CAA. So I was like, we should date before we get married. Like, I don't really know that I want to do this. And I was in talks with Corn Capshaw. I was teaching classes. I was like lecturing to lawyers and lecturing to managers and teaching them in the art of the deal and really trying to educate managers and lawyers about all these, loopholes and things you got to look out for when you're negotiating a deal that financially matter. And I was working with Ford Angler, settling, stadium shows for Live Nation and also like production accounting, doing Hard Fest and, big festival stuff and trying to figure out what I was dating lots of people basically. And I was like, who's gonna marry me? And then at the end of the year, it just was such a no-brainer to go to CAA. There was so much growth possibility, and I was allowed to have my hands in so many baskets to really diversify and provide them with just a wealth of knowledge that they didn't really have in-house, right? From touring operations, financial analytics, teaching the assistants, teaching the agents, lecturing, teaching our tour managers, providing a service that no other agency provides. And it was kind of a no-brainer to the point where I was like, how did nobody ever have this before? Like, this is crazy. Like, I was just shocked that this didn't exist anywhere else. It was kind of a no-brainer. And the good news for me, and really what it's been, is I didn't have, nobody was doing that job before me, right? So I had this like blank slate. I could just do whatever, right? I could create this job from nothing, and nobody could say like, oh, well, the other guy used to do it this way. Like, so it really was this exciting opportunity to create something from nothing. And it's consistently evolving. And I'm the agent for Riot Games, League of Legends, and I negotiate those venue deals. I work with Ludovico and Naudi very closely. I work on a lot of teams with our agents, and I'm over all the deals, you know, Justin Bieber, Ariana Grande, you know, whatever, all of these deals. So now instead of working for one artist, I get to work for our entire roster, really, which is amazing. And sometimes they need a tour account. So I still go out. So I get kind of the best of both worlds. I get to like have a life, sleep in my own bed, make plans, you know, make plans that I know that I could keep, and go to my friends' weddings, or, you know, do stuff that I can really like have a life. But then out of nowhere, like I went to Japan in January and did Queen stadiums in Japan and settled that because they didn't have a tour accountant at the time to really help support them do that. Or Justin Bieber needed somebody to go do Australia stadiums. So I got to like go do that. So I still get to do those things probably once a year. I get to jump out on a tour and, you know, keep my claws sharpened. And I also settle shows remotely for a lot of our artists who don't have tour accountants or tour managers who really know how to do that. So, and I can settle a show remotely. I've been in every venue in America. Like, I don't need to be there to do it.
Hey, Ina, I know MJ is going to take it from here, but just for our audience, can you let them know kind of like where we are in the timeline? Like, what year is this where you had started? So I know that your beginnings were primarily in the 90s, and then you kind of started expanding your portfolio in the 2000s, and then the CAA and kind of trying to shift gears on your turning point is kind of in the mid 2010s, right? Am I correct?
I started on the road in like 93, 92, and then started with John Mayer in 2001, right? So I was a tour manager for like 8-ish years, and then became a tour accountant exclusively for like 15 years. 10 years with John, and then 5 years with other people. And then 4 years ago, I went to CAA, a little over 4 years ago. Well, 4 years ago is when I moved to LA. I went full-time 3-ish years ago with CAA. So now I'm exclusively CAA. Yeah.
So much.
So you were talking about getting fired and why it was the best thing that ever happened to you. And, you know, we have a lot of students, you know, they're starting out, and that's a big worry. And in fact, we just got a question from Nicole, who said she's had people say one fuck up and you could potentially ruin your entire career because it's network heavy. So can you address that and why it was the best thing, and
Well,
why it can actually help you?
Depends on your fuck up. Okay,
True,
let's be clear. Right. If you got fired because you were stealing money from the band, yeah, you're never gonna work again, and you shouldn't, right? But like, I got fired from Nickelback because I could not make it work with the promoter rep and the promoter. It just was contentious. We just couldn't find a happy place. I couldn't navigate what management wanted from me. It felt like there were different messages on who they wanted me to be, because the first conversation that I have with every band is, who do you want me to be? Right? Like, I could be that tour accountant that doesn't leave a penny on the table and there's a bloody line behind me, right? It's not the ideal scenario. It's not what I want, right? But there are some bands out there who are like, I don't care. I got one shot at this and I want every dime. Okay, I work for you. Who do you want me to be? Right? And then there are other bands who are like, it's cool. It's fine. We just want everybody to be happy. Don't poke the bear. It's all good. Some are like, keep it in the middle. And I will be who you want me to be. Right. But learning how to be all of those people is not easy. Like, you have to learn. You're like an octopus, right? It's not easy to be one way. And then also, if you've been asked to be one way on a tour and then you go on another tour, you've left a bloody trail behind you. Nobody wants to see you again, And so there's a way that you have to learn how to be that way, to be like, look, I'm sorry. I got to fight you on this thing. I got management telling me that they have an issue with this, but you have to have management on board supporting you all the way, so you can be whoever you're supposed to be, right? Because you represent the act. And sometimes you're going to falter along the way. It wasn't a right match for me and Nickelback, right? It just wasn't. And that's okay. And I learned a lot from that. I was humbled from that. Ate a lot of ice cream, had to really do a lot of self-reflection, and really figure out, who do I want to be? And also, there's also this balance of who management wants you to be and who do you want to be also, I don't know that I want to beat people up all day long. It's not fun. And you're like, who wins? Who really wins, right? Because a lot of times the band doesn't even know that you're doing this, management's asking you to be this way, or, you got to find this way. And I found that relationships really help. My relationships along the way with all the promoters now, I feel like I can probably call almost every promoter that I've worked with at this point and have a cool conversation and be fine. And they know they respect me because they're doing my job. People will say to me all the time, it's not the most fun to sit across the table from you because we know we have to have our shit together. But if I had a band and I needed to hire a tour accountant, I would hire you. So it's sort of like finding that balance of all of that. But unless you fuck up really bad, like you do something terrible, but something really shouldn't have done, like you broke laws or you stole or something, there's plenty of work out there for everybody. Don't worry about it. Not every tour manager is the right tour manager for the act. It is not a one size fits all. So I think that women make amazing tour managers, but I also think that there is a place for a woman tour manager, and there might be a tour where a woman just isn't. I mean, I've been on tours where you go on that tour bus, and this is back in the 90s, but there were a lot of girls on that bus after the show.
Yep.
And you know what? I don't really even want to see that. That's not interesting to me,
No.
And not entirely sure, but I do think that women soften a tour up too. Having a lot of men on tour, they boys will be boys, right? But the minute you put one woman on that tour bus, everyone's going to start behaving, a lot more, right? And they soften things up. I again, having people of all shapes and sizes and races and creeds and females and males and whatever, gay, LGBT, whatever. I don't care. I think the more well-rounded of a tour you have, the lovelier it is, right? When you get too much of one thing, it's just too much of one thing,
Yeah. And so it's kind of just normal, that flux. It's I know that there's a bunch of us.
Get fired. It's good. Everyone needs to get fired in their life. It's important. It's humbling. You humble shit up. Sometimes you gotta ruffle that shit up. You gotta look at yourself in the mirror and you gotta be like, what's working? And most likely, if you're not getting along with somebody, it's because it's what you don't like somebody. It's probably a good mirror of what you don't like about yourself. So you gotta just,
I find that dynamic really interesting. It's almost as if, what we're saying here is, and I completely agree with everything you said there. what we're saying is it happens. I've been fired. Everyone on this panel has been fired, and we're telling people not to stress about it, not to worry about it. But at the same time, I think that kind of shows that you care, that it shows you care about the job that you do. If you have a period of, after being fired from a gig, of introspection and looking at yourself and questioning yourself and saying, did I do everything I could have to have kept that job, to have made a better relationship? I think it really shows that you care about how you do your job. And that's a hard thing to balance, but I think it's a real thing.
I never handled it well. Let's be clear. Like, getting fired just sucks, right? If you're getting broken up with, it sucks, right? Nobody likes it. But hindsight's 2020, and you look back, like, for me, getting fired from Nickelback was the best thing that ever happened to me. A, because it was just a good, humbling moment, and there were a lot of lessons to learn. But B, because I then got Mumford and Sons like 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later, and had I not been fired, I would have never had Mumford, and I'm pretty sure I would have never had Swedish House Mafia, and then I absolutely would not have had One Direction. And I can look back now and be like, thank you, Nickelback, for firing me. Like, best thing that ever happened to me, right? But that's hindsight, but that's life. You learn your lessons that way. It's never easy.
And sometimes, I think there's several of us that are on this panel. It's like, there are certain acts that just go through people. It has nothing to do with you. In fact, there's certain acts where we all sit there and we go, hey, I'm A-list now, I'm A-level now, because I've been let go from that tour.
Dude, all of the tour accountants that have been fired from Nickelback, you can count them on more than one hand, right? And we all got together once on a telephone with people like, yeah, you're part of the team. And it was sort of like we were ranking each other on, like, how long did you last?
I'm a part of a couple of those teams as well.
Yeah, it's all good.
I'm on the second round of one of those.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine.
I know we've been on that same list with a few difficult artists, I think, that we
Absolutely. We have shared a few, Jim. And it is what it is. Like I said, not every tour manager or every tour accountant or every production manager is the right person for that job. You got to find you're dating, you're living with these people. You don't get to go home and get away from these people. You are literally dating basically everybody you're on the road with. And that's hard to date a lot of people at the same time. Like, it's intense.
So kind of on that same subject, Dinah, is now that what happens what's your mindset? You've touched base on this a little bit, but what is your mindset when you basically fire yourself from it, when you become so comfortable that you decide that you needed that job switch, or whether it be an artist or whether it be a position? And can you kind of touch base on what that mindset is and what your thought process is on that?
The thought process of making the transition out of the road.
Yeah, out of the road, or just switching with bands or positions, or.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when you stay with a band for a long time, there's an incredible opportunity there to sort of hone in on different ways to do the job. A lot of times when you're on tour with other people, you get to learn what to do and what not to do. Like, I think that being a support act tour manager is like the best position you could possibly be in, because you get to sort of watch from the sidelines and see what works and what doesn't. And so that's, at the beginning of a career, like, the ego always wants to be the boss, but I think actually being on the sidelines for a while and being the support act is the best place you can possibly be. And, realizing that transition. But I think also jumping from band to band is also good too, because you learn how different management styles, different agency styles, different types of deals, different places that you visit. So diversification, I think, is key. And that's also what helped me go to CAA, is that I was not a one-lane person. I had worked at I'd worked for Live Nation, I'd worked for artists, I had been personal assistant, I did tour accounting, production, I've done so many different types of jobs that diversification really helps open up your possibilities and your opportunities. So I was really lucky. When I decided to leave the road, I cast out a big net. I called 50 people that I knew and just said, hey, I'm leaving the road. I don't know what I want to do, planting a seed. And I was very lucky. The phone just rang with so many wonderful opportunities because I had diversified, right? And the world knew that I had diversified. And so I worked with enough bands to make enough relationships. And so I think all of that really, really helps make you more marketable, right? So it's like those bands that stay with those tour managers that stay with that one act their entire career, that's awesome, right? I mean, you had a job your whole life, so that's fantastic. Not a lot of diversification, right? And so unless you know you're going to stick to that lane till the end, but I knew that I didn't want to do that. I knew that there was more for me. I also knew that, if I decide that I don't want to work a corporate job anymore in 2, 3, 4 years, whatever, and that I want to calm down a little bit. I've been talking about early retirement my entire life. I'm close to 50, and maybe at 55, taking a little bit of just slowing it down, right? And I think that I would maybe, either find a solution if it works with CAA or whatever. I hope that would be awesome. But if not, just take a tour 6 months a year, go back out. But I'm diverse enough and staying with my finger on the pulse enough to do that. So, I think that the ability to ebb and flow is important. You have to be malleable. Be that octopus, just kind of assimilate wherever you're at, and the more that you can learn how to assimilate, the more marketable and the better and the more at life your ease will be,
For sure. So here we are, present day. I have never had the pleasure of meeting you in person, although we both share a commonality, as does Mary Jo, of having come up in our formative years working with Harry Sandler. And I've been hearing your name for years, but as it happens, we never end up in the same place at the same time because you're over here and I'm over there, and that happens a bit. So your story is fantastic. And now you are in a place at CAA where you have the opportunity to really focus on educating and giving back. And we talked yesterday about using your status or your power. And, we don't like to throw around the term power too much, but right, your status and you have a little bit of pull and influence, how to use it for doing good for people.
Use it. When you've got it, use it, right? Like, because it can be so fun, right?
Yeah.
I know I told the story yesterday. There's a couple things I can say, but I told the story yesterday just because it's kind of fun, that I was the John Mayer ticket fairy, right? It's ridiculous, but I got into this business because I loved music, and people go to shows because they love music, and it's just a break from life. Life is fucking hard, and it's that time for those 2 or 3 or 4 hours that life just doesn't exist, and you get to immerse yourself in the music. And I'm always a glass half full person, and I just really felt like I was in charge of ticketing for John Mayer. In addition to being the tour accountant, I did all the ticketing. I did the on sales, I did the fan club ticketing. So I was into all of that. And I really wanted to do some good. And so I basically went to management and I said, I would like to be the John Mayer ticket fairy. I want to take the front row of every John Mayer show, and I want to upgrade the kids in the crappy seats and put them in the front row. And John was like, yes, how great is that? People thought they were going to be in the last row, and now they're in the front row. He's going to have fans who are super psyched. And I had not heard of anybody else doing this. Maybe they were, but whatever. I hadn't heard of anyone doing it. And so when I put the shows on sale, I would carve out the front row. And as the tour account, of course, I'm also thinking about the loss of revenue. So I ensured them that I would collect the tickets, return the crappy seats back so we could resell them if the show was sold out, the whole thing. But I had that power as the tour accountant and in charge of ticketing to do that, right? And I had the blessing of management, and John loved it. And every single John Mayer show for 10 years, I upgraded the kids to the front row. And it was it's emotion. I cried. I mean, tears. You can Google that. You will see the stories. It's amazing. And that was just something fun, something good. You're backstage. You don't see the light of day every day, like 24 hours a day. There's days where you might not even see the sun. And so it's just a nice thing to do, to give back to the kids, to talk to the kids. I could also like ask them, like, are you in the John Mayer fan club? Like, what's your favorite John Mayer song? Like, whatever. And I was also a super John Mayer fan. So I love to talk to the fans about John and just find out what they wanted to, what they like, what they don't like, also, why are you in the shittiest seat in the house? Like, I want to know, was it because it was the only seat available, or it was because the only thing that you could afford? And when did you buy that seat? Did you buy it yesterday, or did you buy it on the on sale? Like, so I was able to sort of like use that for my own intel, also because I was working with the fan club and I was working in ticketing and I wanted to understand ticket scaling and all that stuff. So also because I'm super curious. So it was sort of like use your power for good. That was a super fun one. And then I didn't have a lot of people in my career, a few, but not a lot, who really sat down and was like, this is how you settle the show. This is the mathematics. This is what you do. This is how it all works. We did not have classes like you guys are doing. Bravo. We all had to figure it out ourselves, right? So as I started to, grow in my career and learn and see these young women especially would come to me, but others just be like, how did you get here? What do you do? Will you explain this to me? And I'm like, yeah, like I'm not precious about this information, like I have no ego about it. I'm happy to educate and help anybody. And so that was one of the exciting things for CAA, was that like they now have someone we can truly educate our assistants, right? Because agents are so busy. They're too busy. They don't have time to sit down and educate. They're like, churning out deal after deal after deal, and deals are getting more and more confusing. And the agent's role is just ever growing. And so now I take that on to educate our assistants. I came up with, there is a notebook this big with a syllabus of classes that I've created, from international classes to taxation classes, ticketing, cross tour, how to negotiate a deal, what the art of the deal. And I created all these teaching materials. It's got to be this thick.
So brilliant. I'm sure
inside the company.
I'm sure that we're all, at one point or another, every tour manager has looked at their deal or their routing or something and gone, don't they know what we do out here? So it's real,
Sure.
How do you think we're going to get from here to there with these? Don't you understand? So it's brilliant that someone put that into place.
Yeah. And
Brilliant.
It's also like business practices and educate our agents about, like, I have agents who call me up all the time and they're like, can I get from Philadelphia to Chicago in a day? Like, would that cost the band any extra money? What are the financial ramifications of that, right? To decide if it's between this one or this one. If this one doesn't have overdrives, you probably want to go with that one, but it's having someone inside to just ask that. They could just ask me, but they don't even have to involve the artist, or like, do you know a merch company? How do you get merch into Canada? How do you do taxation? Do you know a good tax mitigator in Europe? Like, all of these services that we can really holistically help and support our artists and our managers. It's also super helpful because we have agents at our company. Agents come in all shapes and sizes, just like bus drivers and tour managers and everybody. Not everybody's going to be great at everything. And so we have agents that are like super good in a room and really personable, but maybe math is just not totally their forte. So that's where I come into play, because we work at teams at CAA. It's not like you're on your own, right? So every artist has like a team. They have a team for, a lot of times for Europe. And then there's a smaller team, a larger team. Everybody, we work in teams. So I just sit in on the team and I do all the deal analysis. So when we sit down with our artists, I'm in the room going, here's the mathematics. This is what this really means. And then the agent can speak to all the other things that agents want to talk about, right? I'm your math person. And so we ensure that our deals are strong and sound. They mathematically make sense, and we make smarter deals. It's like a no-brainer. But there's some agents that don't have the time to do those analytics. I'm busy. I do analytics all day long. I don't know how an agent would find the time to do that.
It's a super excellent resource for sure.
Yeah,
and we also
hit me up all the time. They're like, I don't even understand how to put this deal into Engage. And Engage is our booking system. And sometimes I'm like, you know what? Neither do I. Like, I don't even understand this deal. And like, I have to go back to the agent and be like, what is this deal? What is this deal? You know? And then we talk about it, because deals are confusing. Also, promoters make deals in all different ways and they use verbiage wrong. People refer to gross box office revenue all day long, and it really means net box office revenue.
Oh, that
And
makes me
makes
crazy.
banana.
Or net. When somebody talks about net, I'm like, there is no net.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
right.
I don't know what you mean by
Right.
that.
The
Or
net,
gross, or the net
There's
gross.
gross box
Net
office,
gross.
adjusted box office, net box office. Period.
right.
Like, I don't know, like, let's use our words, people. You know, or people will be like, you know, the deal is guarantee plus production. Don't know what that means. Where is production? Is it a show
Right.
cost, or is it part of the guarantee? Which is
Right. Plus
so
what? Right.
whatever.
Or plus.
It's all, we're growing, we're ebbing. It's great. I lost the plot. I'm sorry.
and that's okay.
Don't get me on net versus gross and all those
Right.
terms, because I'll
Yeah.
get you on that, man.
We can go down a rabbit hole. Definitely.
Okay, whatever. Where do you want to go from here? I'm cool. Whatever.
So we also chatted a bit yesterday about being able to make some business decisions, whether it's in your hiring or the way you diversify for your artist, when you get to a place where you can have an influence on the business around you, whether you're hiring people differently, whether you're looking to diversify, whether you're diversifying in personnel or diversifying your interests personally or for your client. We had a good chat about that yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm first and foremost, I'm all about hiring the right person for the right job, right? Like, period, right? And I think a lot of times in my life, I was looked over because I was a woman. That happened, but I never really let it get me down, because I was like, well, you're the idiot. Like, if you think that boobs interfere with the fact that I don't know how to do my job, like, I don't know, you know, whatever, your loss, because I'm the best person for the job. So if that's an issue for you, then like, I don't want to work for you anyway. So go with God, like, go hire idiots. Fine by me, right? So for me, now that I'm in a position, I mentor all shapes and sizes. Like, I don't really care what you are. I don't care what race you are. I don't care what, you know, if you're a man, a woman, whatever. I don't care. I want the best person for the job. But I think that if you have the opportunity to provide diversity within your, it's a reflection on you. It's a reflection on your artist. It's a reflection on your management. It's a more holistic living situation. It provides a safer environment for everybody. The more women you have on the tour, the more people of race and creed and everything. Like, it means that, like, it's music unites all people. So you should represent that on your tour if you can. And it's a good, and when you start doing it, it's a good example for other people to do it, you know, and it's exciting. Like, when I was on One Direction, there were so many women on that tour. It was awesome. You know, we could fill buses with it. You know, it's great. Women need other women too. And, you know, everybody needs other people to commiserate. You never want to be the only one. Like, that's not fun.
Right.
You know, it's not fun for anybody, and it's not, you know, it's not a good growth experience. And
I was an only woman one time. The only on the whole tour. I was.
Oh,
the
really? Oh, no. I would
think
say
of-
that 75% of my career, I was the only one.
Yeah, until, I mean, the last decade, maybe, you know, there were maybe
Yeah.
a couple, but
Yeah.
early on, definitely the only one. And I was always way the youngest, because I worked for all these legacy acts early on.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden I'm not the youngest.
Yeah, that was also when I made that transition on one
Not.
site. I looked around and I was like, oh my God, I'm the old one. Like, there's like I was in the top 5 of oldest on the tour, and I was like, what? When did that happen? You know?
Mary Jo said not the youngest. Mer, mer, mer.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Over to Doug. He's going to chat a little bit about relationships, because that, as we know, and again, touch point, it's a touch point back to every single previous webinar of the 23 that we've had, where we talk about touching back to relationships.
Yeah, and on that, you know, just to wrap up what the previous section you were talking about, I think it really highlights something that we've said on multiple occasions, in that your experience from touring has informed your work in the agency world and given you experience that a lot of people in that field do not always have. And that really is, I can speak to that as a tour manager. Earlier in my career, you know, I had, and I still work with him. I have an agent who used to be a musician and has been on the road. And the difference between working with him and working with an agent who hasn't toured is like night and day. So, you know, I've seen it from the other side, and I see how valuable transferable skills are in this industry, going from one sector to another. So, you know, if we could just circle back on, if we could just tie that whole section off by saying, you know, no experience that you can get in the industry it's not going to harm you. It's only going to benefit you. You're getting experience from
Absolutely.
various different.
You got to humble it up, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I have told the story in previous interviews, and so I don't want to beat a dead horse. But very quickly, as John Mayer was supposed to go on tour 1 year, and he fucked up his arm or something like that. And it was May. Again, he keeps canceling tours in May, like twice in my career. I'm like, the worst time, like couldn't do it in October. And so I didn't have a tour at the time. And the Goon, who was very famous at the time, was an accountant out there representing a lot of tour accountants, was trying to help me. And he introduced me to my dear friend now, Craig Snyderman, who works at AEG, who at the time was the tour accountant for REM. And he was tour, and I was already a tour accountant for John Mayer, right? So I had maybe a little bit of a chip on my shoulder that I was like, I finally made it as a tour accountant, and I was really holding on to that pretty strong. And Craig came to me and he said, listen, REM's going to tour Europe. We're going to do open field space stuff, and I need somebody to do like gate drops and assist me. You know, will you come out? And I was like, I'm already a tour accountant. Like, I don't now, and now I'm going backwards. Like my ego was like in the way, and I didn't really want to go backwards. And he could only offer me like half of my normal rate. And I was like annoyed about it. But he was like, listen, I'm going to teach you everything I know. So like the worst thing that happens is after 3 months, you don't have any other gig. Like, come and do it. I'll teach you everything I know. And if you learn anything, then like it's a win. And I sort of like humbled up, and I was like, all right, fine. Right. I hadn't done a lot of Europe at that time. Like I'd done a little bit, but like not a ton, and definitely not open fields in like stadiums or like big GA stuff, 25, 30,000 people all over Europe. So I agreed. I was doing gate drops, and gate drops are when you go, you know, this is back in the day when you didn't have scanning, and tickets were all paper. Nothing was automated. Your ticket reports were basically Excel spreadsheets, which I could create, and there's no validity there. They're not really being pulled off of proper ticketing systems. And so the way that you validate that drop is it's hard, and it's GA, right? So, I mean, I don't know anybody that can look at a GA crowd and be like, oh, no, that's actually 23,000 tickets instead of 22,000 tickets. Like I can read a crowd, but not to that minutia, right? And so my job was to do gate drops, where basically I had to corral a group of people in every city, where I'd have to, like, I was in Spain, and I'd have to go to like the college area on the morning of the show and be like, do you like REM? Do you want to see REM? Do you want to work with me for 3 hours? Also, I don't speak Spanish. Like, that was interesting. And I had to corral like 20, 25 people. I had to figure out before, like, meet with security, how many entrances, how many security guards, like, you know, to figure out how many people I would need to sit at the gates, right? And then I would basically put everybody at different gates, and they would have to make sure that every ticket was ripped, and then it was put into a garbage bag. And then I would have 2 runners who would go and grab those garbage bags and bring them to me, and then I would weigh the tickets.
Deadwood management.
I remember those.
Yeah, you can actually
Wow.
weigh tickets
Yeah.
that give you a pretty good, there's a science to it, right? Which I'm trying to keep it brief here, but there's a science to it. So we were in Steve, and so I honed in on this. Like, I'd never done this before. And Craig gave me direction, but it was very loose. So again, I was in a vulnerable position, super scared, really like important job, right? I want to do the best I can. And so I'm like trying to figure it out, like to our previous conversation about like feeling like it's over your head. And those first couple of shows were like, right? But then I sort of was like, all right, I got this. I know how to do this. Like each country that I'm in, I'll have a set of directions. I'll translate them into that local language. You know, I like figured out how to talk to everybody and how to like, you know, discuss this with the security and how to get, you know, all the gates and figure out my numbers and the whole thing. I like took it upon myself to figure this out, like exactly how to do it. And so we're in Stavanger, Norway, and let's just say, you know, we were at a stadium and our office was in one of those one of the suites, and we were looking down and you could not fit another person on that floor. And we all know that like when you have a GA floor, it usually looks empty and sell out, right? So when you can't fit another person on that floor, something is not right. And all the ticket reports were Excel spreadsheets. I knew they were bullshit. I knew from the get-go because everyone was being kind of shady about giving me ticket counts and the whole thing. So let's just say I counted a lot more than how many tickets they told us they sold. And so we confiscated the tickets at the end of the night. I hand counted them no less than 10 times. I did not sleep. Like I was like totally stressed out about it. And we went legal, and a week later, the promoter acquiesced, sent us a check for 175 grand, and we returned the tickets. Bam, Bob's your uncle. So I like all of a sudden like learned this amazing thing, busted a promoter. The artist obviously couldn't have been happier. They ended up paying me my original ask, which was awesome as a bonus and a thank you. And then I went on to use that process on One Direction, where we basically busted the promoter in South America and got paid a lot more than $175,000. So I ended up using that. So I humbled up, put my ego down, and went and did a job that I thought was beneath me, ended up not being beneath me, learned so much, like it was totally amazing, and ended up using it in my favor. And it's, again, diversification, get uncomfortable, do all the jobs. I don't think it's fair that you can ask anybody while you are rising up as a production manager or a tour manager or a tour director to do a job that you don't know how to do yourself, right? Like that's the only way to be more marketable, right? And like humble it up. Who cares if you go and sell merch for a tour after being a tour manager for 5 years? Because I guarantee selling merch for 3 months on a tour where you think it's like beneath you or whatever is ridiculous. You're going to learn so much about mathematics, about accounting. You're going to know who's doing it right, who's not doing it right. You know, you're going to learn, you're going to meet people along the way who you might hire along the way. Like, I mean, I can't tell you, I mean, I'm famous in Stavanger, right? Like I go now, if I go back to Norway, people were like, you're the REM girl. Yeah. Like I thought that it's hilarious. It makes you just, there's always something to learn. Like get over yourself. Like there's no, like remove ego.
And we also have touched back, another touch point for folks who've been following along continuously is that build your war chest of skills. And sometimes maybe the fancy tour management title isn't there, but again, I would never have, and we spoke, Jim Runge brought this up on the call yesterday, is that on the Black Keys, there were 5 people that had the title of tour manager on other jobs working on that tour. And Jim was the tour manager, and the ATM was a tour manager, and I did production, and our production manager was a tour manager front of house guy, and the front of house guy was a tour manager. And we all just wanted to do this great tour and get all this experience and work with a great team of people. And we did. And we also, you get your chops together, you know, you got to have a lot of chops.
You can't get hung up on that stuff. You just can't. Diversification, 100%. You never know when you're going to learn that.
Well, and also when you get to the point where you're like a tour director or budgeting the tour or whatever, if you understand all that stuff, you can understand how to save money or Tetris things together and come up with a better bottom line. So it even just affects you in that way. You know?
Indeed. If you've done the position, you know the constraints or the advantages of the position, and you can say, well, that position can also flex this way or that way or not, or not.
Look,
or vendors.
And every time you do something, you're going to either learn how to do it or how not to do it. And both is great.
Both is great.
Yeah.
You're also going to learn maybe like what you're good at and what you're not good at. right? So like, it's good to know your strengths and work towards them.
Absolutely, and that's great advice. I think you need to know when to park your ego. Just because you've tour managed a club tour does not mean you're ready to tour manage an arena tour or a stadium tour. So, you know,
Or that you want to, by the way,
that you
or
want
that
to.
you want to.
Absolutely.
And,
Yeah.
and, and,
Stadium are a behemoth.
and it's okay not to want to go
Absolutely.
into a certain direction in
Absolutely.
your career.
Yeah. You do
Yes.
you.
Yeah.
So I never really got to talking about relationships as I wanted to ask you about there. You worked for Mumford and Sons, and I, in the early part of my career, I was very fortunate to be with a band that opened for Mumford on a European arena tour, and we were the first of three on an arena tour. So we were bottom of the ladder. We're 30-minute set, 10-minute, 15-minute changeovers, in and out, get out of our hair, and normally. And being on that tour had a really profound impact on me as a tour manager and the band I worked for, who I still work for, and the way that we now, now that we're headlining our own tours, how we bring support artists on and deal with their crew. They could not have been more welcoming. That was a big tour with a big crew, and they were just. You talked earlier about jaded roadies and people that are not happy on the road, and I saw Marcus Mumford sitting with their assistant monitor engineer, sitting with their camera crew, sitting with their VIP rep in catering, and I saw them. I saw a family on the road who cared for people. They would, Ben and Marcus would come into our dressing room and sit with the band, ask them how they're doing, ask them how the crew's treating them. Is everyone being looked after? And it was very clearly a top-down approach from, mandated from the artist to their crew to look after this new band that have just hit the road. And it was really, an amazing experience. One of the best tours I've ever done and will do. Yeah. So I wonder if you could speak to that and if that's something that you felt when you were on the road with them, and how different that is to other tours to be on something like that.
Absolutely. I mean, they are the loveliest people. They please and thank you and so much gratitude. I was pretty devastated, crazily enough, when I got One Direction during the course of that tour. Mumford was going out again, and they asked me back, and I had to turn them down. And it was probably the hardest job to turn down in my career, because I loved them all so much, but I was in the midst of 1D, and I couldn't leave 1D. They are so kind and so lovely. And I think that, I say to everybody, shit falls downhill, right? So it comes from the top. And if the band is nice and kind, they're only going to hire nice and kind people, and it's going to be kumbaya out there, right? And I said this on our call yesterday, that the production office is the heartbeat of the tour. It just is, right? Because usually the band comes in later, like for the most part. And when you start touring pretty big, the band comes in later, tour manager's coming in a little bit later, but you've got that production manager and that production office that's there from the minute you load in until the minute you load out. And they set the tone for the day. And when it's nice and kind and like lovely, it's just, touring is the loveliest place that you could possibly be. And there is nothing worse than being on a tour where people are assholes. And if you are, like, go find out how to be happy somewhere else, because I think that those relationships are so important. And like I touched on previously, when I was on tour with Jacko Pierce, we had, Matchbox 20 opening up for us. And then a year later, we were opening up for them. And because we were nice to them, they were nice to us, like it all comes around, man. That shit's karma, right?
Yes, it is.
So it's like, you're just building karma out there with everybody. And it also makes it so much easier to do your job when you work for nice people, that gets you up in the morning. It's hard. Some days it's a slog, sometimes you're going to have 10 shows in a row because of whatever shit happens. And all of a sudden you've got promo days and you've got regular days. And now you're like, I haven't had a day off in 12 days. Like you're going crazy. And you don't care because they're so nice, you know? Jacko Pierce, that was like family for me. They were so wonderful and better than Ezra. Like those guys, that was like family. They're the nicest people on the planet, you know? And then there are some artists who shall not be named, Jim and I, right? That like, I couldn't get off that tour fast enough, you know? I mean, it was awful, right? And you're like, why am I doing this? Like the whole thing that's great about being on the tour is that it's a job, but it doesn't feel like a job. You know, there's so much satisfaction. Every day you get to see this amazing rock show that you build, and it's beautiful, but it's not beautiful when you're around shitty people. So like, if you're shitty, get off the road, like go be a yoga teacher, go do whatever is going to make you happy. Like, I don't care, but you know, miserable people is not the place for road. Like work out your shit, you know, because it's just so lovely and it's magic when everybody is nice.
And shout out to all the production ladies that join the call and listen in and give their knowledge, who make the offices amazing for everyone.
Absolutely. Look, there are production assistants out there who take that one extra little thing. I don't care what it is, right? Like maybe they just put like, you know, a bowl of M&Ms on the tour bus. Like I don't care what it is, right? Like what, just that little extra thing, or they put a joke on the day sheet, or they add like their favorite coffee shop on the city, in the next city, whatever it is, those little things, they make a difference. We're human, you know, bands who decide to take the hit and carry catering. I love you very much, you know, like that's the, you know, food, it's your energy. Like shitty food, just, you know, whatever. I've digressed, I'm sorry, but it's
and also
all those little things, right? Like it's just like happy people make other happy people. Gratitude.
And also back to touch point, another touch point for previous episodes. If you're not happy, it's okay to leave too, because sometimes you're done. Sometimes you've been there, you've done the thing, and it's okay to go.
Yeah, go be happy. Nobody can, like everyone. I just want everybody to be happy. Like, go be happy. Yeah.
Ina, question. Yeah. Who were some of your mentors when you were first starting out, and who are some of your mentors now?
So, I mean, I would say, I can't necessarily, I mean, we talked about Harry Sandler. He is like my Papa Bear. He was just such an incredible supporter at the time, and helped me throughout my career and really just made me feel like everything was going to be okay. And that he really helped me on so many levels. So he was a really big one. And then I came into, I would collide with a lot of different people who helped me along the way, whether it was a promoter who sat with me after a show and talked to me about how things work for a couple of hours to help educate me, or, you know, managers who really were so incredibly supportive. I mean, I would say like the One Direction management team was so supportive, and their support was sort of like a mentorship, you know, they helped me be a better tour accountant. You know, Craig Snyderman on REM has always been such an incredible confidant for me and helping me along the way, and a big supporter, still is. I call him all the time. And, you know, I mean, so many. I could sit here and name drop like Craig, because I would say that more often than not, there have been wonderful people throughout my career who have supported me. And for me, that's kind of a mentorship. Like just getting support is mentoring. Just knowing that people have your back, that you're not alone out there, that there's always somebody that you can call and say, that you can call and just say like, I don't know. And it's okay. Like it's a safe place. I tell all the assistants at CAA that my office is Vegas. Like what happens in here stays in here. You can come in here and you can get as vulnerable as you need to be, and I will hold the space for you. And you could just, you know, say what you need to say. And it's those people along the way that did that for me, whether it was Craig or Harry or Harry Sandler, and those people along the way that just made a safe place for you to be vulnerable and weren't going to judge you that you didn't know. Like, I don't know how to read a ticket audit. Will you show me? You know, instead of being like, I can't believe you don't know how to read a ticket audit. Like, that is a mentor moment. It doesn't always have to be like a long-term thing. You can be a mentor for a day, you know? And so I had so many of those people. Ford Englerth, when I was at my first show at the Troubadour, I don't even remember what show it was. It was like in my first few years. Sat, you know, I'll never forget. He talks about it all the time because we work a lot together. We used to work a lot together. He's like, remember that time when you were such a little baby and you came and you were like, what's a backline? What's a, you know, like, and just said like, what's a rider? How do I write a rider? And he like sat down, you know, in the alleyway of the Troubadour and talked me off the ledge and answered all my questions and was always such a great supporter, you know? So, I mean, there's been so many. I've been very lucky. And now I would say, I have a lot of confidants. Like within CAA, there's a handful of agents where I feel like I can get vulnerable and they support me. Whether it's, you know, I mean, Emma Banks is a fierce, amazing, incredible woman.
She's
you know,
amazing.
in my next lifetime, I want to be Emma. You know, and I have cried many a cries with Emma, and she holds the space, and she's been such an incredible supporter of mine. And Mike Greek and Brian Manning and we have wonderful people at CAA who have been mentoring me along the way, also helping me navigate that world. I mean, that's a whole nother world to try and figure out, you know, so. Ta-da!
Ta-da.
Was there a couple more points?
We're looking to see if there's any questions that have come
Yeah,
up, but I
any
think we've
questions?
covered all of them.
I think that there are 70 things happening in the chat, but I have not looked at any
That's
of them.
okay.
We've
we're
actually we've hit on all of them, everything that's come
Okay.
up, surprisingly. That's why we were just looking to see if there's any questions we have. But
Well, I pride myself on efficiency. So, you know, I'm an efficiency expert, don't you know? So,
There's
yeah,
a couple
self-proclaimed.
Q&A.
Mhm.
Huh?
One of our anonymous attendees is asking if there are any courses during this downtime, anything that you would sort of recommend to broaden or bone up mathematics or
Absolutely.
skills, anything off the top of your head that you can
Well,
think?
first of all, Microsoft Excel. If there is, if every single person watching this panel does not know how to use Microsoft Excel, go get it.
Another
period.
touch point,
Like,
point.
Hands
Yes,
down,
consistent.
this is the wave of the future. You
Right.
must know, you have to hone in that brain, right? Like people, I don't care, because you need it with merch, you need it with VIP, you need it as a production assistant, you need it as a production manager. There is not a role, like even like a guitar tech needs to know how to use Excel, or a sound person. Like people are constantly asking you, how much is that going to be? I need a list of blah, blah. Like I need a, you know, an equipment list, and you have to put the prices at the side, and you have to know not to type in the dollar sign, you know, like it's like those things. Like, so everybody, Microsoft Excel, hands down, like hone in on those tools that make you smarter and more efficient, right? And if it's production people, it's learn CAD. Obviously, that's something that's really important to know how to do. You know, there's a lot of free courses on Coursera or whatever that are the art of negotiation. Hey man, you know what? If you're a tour manager and you're a production manager, understanding the business of of what you're working on, being a tour manager is not just babysitting and moving people around and being a travel agent. Like there is, you're in a business, you're in a multi-million-dollar business, billion-dollar business, right? Understand all of that. To understand the world that you live in is to make you better. It'll make you make better decisions, right? You have to understanding what the other person that you're dealing with is the difference between you being a good partner or not a bad or a bad partner. Do you know what I mean? Like understanding. So I've worked for the promoter, not a lot, but enough to get that perspective and enough to be like, oh, right. So sometimes I tend to not, you know, beat a promoter up about something, or understanding what that business model looks like. So I think all of that is really any kind of education. You know, also like bettering yourself from a mental health level, you know, taking a meditation class, I think learning how to relax and learning how to be calm and learning how to handle high stress situations comes with some type of spiritual meditation practice. Whether it's learning how to breathe, take a minute, have a mantra, have a verse that works for you, like whatever it is, know how to know when to walk away and walk outside and take a break and walk around in a circle and say, Om Mani Padme Om, if that's what you need to say, or, whatever, deep breaths and count to 10. Like, so I think just growing yourself holistically. So, the tools on how to drive the bus, but then also like how to drive the bus calmly, So all of that I think is super helpful. I don't think that I worked enough on my meditation practice.
Anna, you said something earlier. It's just come back to me that really resonated with me. And you said you broke up with your life when you left New York. Mm-hmm. I think that's such a powerful thing. And I think one of the greatest things about doing this job is it allows you the freedom to live where, within reason, wherever you want, especially at that period in your life where you're younger and you don't have you don't have as much family constraints. If you want to move to Brazil and you're good enough at your job, you will still get hired from Brazil.
Absolutely.
Do you feel that, again, talking about people who are on the road and are unhappy, do you feel like you gave yourself a new lease of life? And I'm bringing this from my own experience, having moved to another country, had to learn another language, and it reinvigorated me, even just before I turned 30. Do you agree that making a big life change like that, flipping the table and just going, I'm going to start again, I'm going to force myself to learn something new, to live somewhere else, to make new friends? Did you find that an invigorating experience? Do you find it rekindle your love for music or touring or whatever it was?
Invigorating is probably not the word I would use. Really fucking uncomfortable is probably more what I would say. But if it's not hard, I think that some things are important that they need to be easy. What I will say is that when I decided to make the transition, everything flowed in that direction very easily. It was not easy emotionally and mentally. It was scary because I defined myself as a tour accountant and as a roadie. It was my life. It's all I knew. From the time that I turned an adult, from my early 20s until my middle 40s, it's all I knew. It's all I did. I was either backpacking around Southeast Asia when I wasn't on tour. So I was like constantly moving, or on the road, moving. And then all of a sudden I decided to just stop. And that was scary, but you got to get vulnerable. You got to get uncomfortable in order to create chaos in your life, to start it, to create change. I don't regret it at all. I think it's been really good. It's challenged me in a lot of ways. And I think also when you're on the road a lot and you're moving around a lot, you tend to not deal with yourself because you're just so busy dealing with everybody else. And when you get off the road, post-tour depression is real. That is, PTSD is real. And all of a sudden you're left with just yourself, and you've got to feed yourself. And what am I going to do with myself? Because you're not worrying about you for 9 months a year. And all of a sudden you have to worry about you, but you're just playing catch up. You're catching up on your bills, catching up on what needs to be done in the house. And you needed to build those shelves and whatever, catching up. And then all of a sudden you're getting ready for the tour and you're leaving again. And there's never really enough time for you to deal with you. And so all of a sudden, when I decided to leave the road, I caught up with myself, and then I had to really live with me. And it's been 4 very introspective, challenging, lots of therapy time of who am I? What have I done? What are the ramifications of these decisions that I've made? I don't regret any of them, but a lot of, it's scary. It's really scary, but, and you kind of have to be brave. But hopefully it was a decision for the good of just bringing a little bit more balance into my life, because being on the road is extreme balance. You're either out or you're not, right? And so you're never in balance. You're either, it's all tilted this way or it's all tilted this way. And as soon as you get your, you gain 5 pounds on the road, you come off the road, you lose the 5 pounds, you get back on the road, you gain 5 pounds, and your life off the road is just constantly catch up. And so this really allowed for me to play catch up and then really hopefully self-improve, and be a more holistic person. It's hard. The road takes it all out. And I don't think you realize how much it takes out until you stop, really stop. Like there isn't another tour. So when I left the road, before I moved to LA, I took 5 months and I shut my email off, and it said, there was an auto message that said, hello, receiver. I am practicing relaxation. Talk to you in March. And that was in November. And I literally did not answer one email for 5 months and went to places all over Southeast Asia that don't have cell service that I'd always wanted to go to, and really just lived life for a minute. And it was so important. It was I think knowing when it's time to do that that's the key. But yeah, it wasn't invigorating. But it was fucking hard, but I'm really glad that I did it. And I know also that the option for me to go back is still there. If I wanted to leave CAA, I mean, I'm sure they might be angry at me, but as long as I went out with a CAA artist, I think it might be more okay with it. And I wanted to go back out on the road again. That opportunity is still there. It's never all or nothing, and I think that when people take a year before they go to college, like that gap year, I think it's great that people take a minute. I have a dear friend, Alex McLeod, who some of you may know, tour accountant extraordinaire, dear friend. He took a break. He was on the road forever and ever. And then I don't know how long he took, a year or two. And I think that's good for everybody. I think you can just get too tired. Take a year. It's fine. There'll be another job. Don't worry about it. Your mental health and bettering you is more important than any dumb job.
I got beat up on one tour and I took 6 months off after that, went to Asia, went to the jungle, did charity work.
How to do it.
And then took a step back from tour managing, which made me super happy.
Mm-hmm. I think everybody's getting the break that they weren't anticipating right now, right? So I don't know that I'm going to encourage people to take another year off, right? Unless you're financially prepared for it. But everyone's getting that break. And I think that people are going in. And I think we're finding, I'm sure a lot of your fellow roadies are going holy shit. It's scary. What am I doing? What am I doing with my life? What's going on? Well, yeah, that's what I went through, even without COVID. You need that though. You have to have that existential crisis to figure out what's working for you.
Break it down a little bit.
Very important. Ina is such a moving story. And, as we get towards the end here, I know that we had talked briefly on ending thoughts and how your story what do you think would if you had some final words? You had talked about the universe and curiosity and so many different things to leave on a good note. I'd love to hear your thoughts. So
I have learned with all of my spiritual practices and life in general is that I don't give my life up to the universe, but I do believe that there is a grander plan in place, and that when you think getting fired, there's usually something better on the other side, right? There's a grander plan, and having just a little bit of calm and knowing that you are where you're supposed to be right now, and that it's giving you an opportunity to do A, B, and C, and looking at that and understanding why am I here right now? What am I supposed to learn from this? Is really good introspection, taking those moments, not denying, if you get fired or COVID happens, there's a reason. The world needs a respite. You need a respite. Take that time, use that for self-reflection. How can I better myself during this time? How can I re-educate myself? Universe always has a plan. So just, finding calm within that a little bit is going to be helpful. And in addition, for me, I think my success came from my like huge appetite for curiosity. I'm just a super curious person. Like, you know, whatever it was, I just wanted to know more and more and more and more, right? So like when I worked for John Mayer, I knew that ticketing was really important because you got to follow the money. So I hired a guy at Ticketmaster to sit down with me for an afternoon and teach me every Ticketmaster report there was, and teach me what I could learn from those reports and what reports I should be asking for, right? But that was based out of total curiosity. Be curious. I told the story yesterday about how, you know, I talk to our VIP companies before they come on tour and find out how are they going to move their merchandise, and talk to my production manager and find out, do we have a half a truck? Can we put the merch on the truck and make this more efficient for everybody, right? Like that's based out of curiosity, right? So it's not curiosity killed the cat. Like ask questions. Like that is going to always be your driving force to learning more, because the minute you stop being curious, that's when you stop learning, period. You know, and there's always something to learn. I'm learning every day, always. You're never going to stop learning, but you've got to be curious just about it. Ask questions. Anytime you have the opportunity to come to cross paths with somebody new, ask them, you know, ask them this question and find out what they have to tell you, you know? And I mean, I think curiosity is really the way to, that's my driving, that's the fuel that drives me just in life. I travel the world because I'm curious. I eat different types of food because I'm curious. Like whatever it is, I'm just curious. You gotta be curious.
Nice.
I think that's the most times I've said the word curious in my life.
Curious. Was there any final questions or anything that we had before we wrap up here?
I think we got them all.
Yeah.
I think we have covered everything. Yeah.
Awesome. I mean, just keep at it, people. Don't let the COVID get you down. It's all going to come back. I promise. People need music. It's, you know what? Take the time to like learn how to, I don't know, ride a bike and learn French, or take Excel, or take a walk, work on your meditation practice. Like use this time for good. Don't look back and be like, all I did was like smoke weed and watch TV. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Oh, beautiful. Well,
that's what I gotta say.
Everyone that's with us today, thank you for being here with us, and thank you, Ina, for
Thank you, Ina.
Thank you.
Thank you
joining
so
us.
much.
It's an honor.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for joining
Honor for
us.
me.
We look forward to seeing everyone next Monday, and we'll have more information as we get closer. So everyone have a wonderful Thursday, and stay safe.
Awesome.
Thank you guys.
Thanks,
Have a good
everybody.
Bye.
Stay safe. Bye-bye.